This book includes the idea of dual process reasoning, and that's just a model for the way that the brain works. And the hard lesson from reading this book is that sometimes the brain works against us when we try and learn something new. Learning something new is difficult anyway. It can be difficult because the topic is complicated. It can be difficult because the topic is unfamiliar. But actually, there are parts about the way that the brain operates that make it even more difficult than it should be. And so we'll delve a little bit today into why that might be the case. Kahneman's sort of central thesis is that the brain has two modes of operation, and we'll call them System 1 and System 2. You can tell immediately that this person is cross with you. That's a System 1 response. You make that judgment straight away. You don't need to think about it. The answer comes naturally. We might come back to this later, common sense. And I've stolen this photograph from the book. It's an easy thing to do. That needs System 2. You can do it. You really don't want to. And the interesting thing about looking at this is although you could engage in the mental math that would give you an answer here, your body knows that that's a process that's going to cost you. It'll actually cost you in energy. Your blood flow will change. Your pupils will dilate. You burn more calories when you're doing this than when you're recognizing the cross face. And so evolutionarily, we would like to avoid doing this if we possibly can. The brain will always use System 1 if it can help it, and it will always avoid using System 2 if it can help it, because it's more expensive. It's more expensive for you as a living organism. And so I want to talk today a little bit about how we should respond to that as a model if we're trying to learn new topics, if we're trying to learn new subjects. Here's an example stolen from Shane Frederick's article, which is now referred to as the cognitive reflection test. And I'll ask you to think about this a little bit. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Shh, 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 people. I want you to think about it. Don't share yet. We'll come back to sharing later. So your System 1 has provided you with a quite immediate answer. And unless you're very used to engaging System 2, or you've seen this question before, then probably that answer is wrong. And if we are attempting to learn a new topic, if we're attempting to engage in a new subject, how should we deal with the fact that our common sense answer will often provide us wrong information and intuitively wrong information? Let's look at another example from my field. This is from physics. Physics likes to study motion, and one of the more obvious things about motion that we like to talk about is velocity. So velocity is how fast and in what direction something is moving. So this ball, when I throw it upwards, it starts out heading upwards, and it slows down, and then it's heading downwards, and then it speeds up. And so that motion can be described in terms of the velocity, how fast and in what direction it's moving. We're also interested in changes in velocity. That's a really important part of physics and motion and understanding that. Any change in velocity, physics refers to as acceleration. So it doesn't matter. Physics likes to keep the jargon to a minimum. So it doesn't matter whether it's speeding up or slowing down or changing direction. All of those things we think of as acceleration, which leads to this absolutely hilarious physics meme and also to the potential for some confusion. So the insidious thing about System 1 is not only will System 1 provide you with an immediate answer, if System 1 has any trouble, it will decide instead to answer a different question. And that is actually a really useful tactic. It's called a substitution heuristic, or rule of thumb. If somebody asks you to pick the heavier of two apples, you'll probably pick the biggest one. Now, you don't know that the biggest one is the heaviest apple, but it's probably a pretty good guess that big apple means heavy apple, small apple means light apple. And so System 1 provides you with an answer to a different question than the one you were asked. You choose the heaviest apple, the biggest one will probably do. So when we talk about acceleration, I'm going to ask you to watch this journey again. We throw the ball up. Right at the very top of its journey, the ball stops for an instant. It has to. It's coming back down again. I want you to think about what is the acceleration of the ball at the top of its journey. Shh. I'm asking you to think. We'll come to sharing later. the immediate answer that system 1 provides is 0. At the top of its journey, 0. But actually, system 1 is answering a question about velocity, not a question about acceleration. Velocity is easy to see. It's easy to see what direction and how fast something is moving in. Acceleration is much more difficult. So system 1 tries to answer the question, what is the velocity of the ball at the top, when I'm really asking you about the acceleration. Acceleration, remember, is the change of velocity. If the ball was heading up and then it's heading down, the velocity is changing. So at the top, it must still be accelerating. Another way to think about that is, if acceleration is a change in velocity, and you get to the top and your velocity is 0, if your acceleration was also 0, then the velocity doesn't change, so you just stay there. And that would be really cool, but tragically not actually what happens. So system 1 gives you an immediate answer. System 1 gives you an answer that's sometimes incorrect. System 1 will try and answer a different question if it seems like it's less effort, and that can be problematic. So this is a quote from one of my students just from last term, trying to reconcile the system 1 response, common sense, with the response we've been trying to learn in a physics classroom, with the new topic that we've been trying to understand. And so what's the best way for educators to try and deal with that immediate gut response, that immediate quick response? Well, we could do one of two things. We could try and improve our system 1's intuition. We could say, well, here's a new topic, but let's train system 1 to work really well in this new area. Or we could instead say, well, what we should really do is when we get that first answer, we should engage system 2 and analyze that answer to see whether it makes sense. And those are two approaches to this kind of developing expertise in a new subject. And it's difficult to decide which of those is better. It's very difficult to come up with a researchy, evidence-based way to work out which of those two approaches is better. But that hasn't stopped people from trying. And I particularly like a paper by Beth Lindsay and co. in Physics Education Research Journal published by Physical Review. And in it, they showed this figure. And this figure is actually taken from an article by Mila Krzyzewskaja from Physics Today, and it shows some of the things that we're trying to engage with when we're helping people learn new material. So the orange box is a problem you've been set. Maybe you've been asked to pick the heaviest apple. The very first arrow there going to your left is the immediate answer that system 1 gives you. So the first hazard, each of these triangles is a little hazard. The first hazard, A, is just going with the answer that system 1 gave you without really worrying about it. If we carry on a little bit further, we're heading towards this sort of cycle of reflection. The next hazard up here is that you don't really think too hard about that answer, and that's labeled the path of cognitive frugality. This way there be dragons. So if you're busy or you can't invest the time in stopping to think about that system 1 answer, that's the way you go. Not really very much reflection. What we'd like to do is engage system 2 and go off around this cycle and think, well, wait a minute, does that answer make sense? Can I reconcile it with other things I know? That would be the system 2 reflection that we'd like to engage. The next hazard, C, is the possibility, and this again is the brain working against us, the possibility that system 2 will first of all try to confirm that system 1 was right. That is its natural instinct. Remember, it's very lazy. It doesn't want to spend all those extra calories. It doesn't want to force you to work harder than you should. So what it does is first of all look for evidence that your first gut instinct was correct. And so that's hazard C. We need to avoid just confirmation bias. System 2 is hunting for a reason to believe that system 1 got it right the first time. And the last of all hazard D, is the possibility that you don't actually have the correct background knowledge to do that reflection. So perhaps there's something in your background knowledge which is misinformation or which is not quite correct. In that case, of course, any amount of reflection is difficult. And so for Beth Lindsay and colleagues, they developed a protocol thinking about air resistance. So that's a new physics topic to most people. Most people haven't come across that before. Thinking about air resistance to try and separate groups of students into two groups. One group who were trained in system 1. So their system 1 was given better practice to have better intuition. And in the other group, reflection was encouraged instead. And designing that as an education experiment is very, very difficult. Education research is very, very difficult. In my home discipline, which is physics, we often can switch off this, that, or the other control variable so that we can concentrate on one thing. That's almost impossible to do when human beings are trying to learn something new. So the protocol is very clever, and I'm not going to go into it now. I encourage you to read the paper when you next have a moment. But the basic conclusion from the research is this. It is better for a group of students who have the correct background knowledge. So we're going to avoid hazard D. They have the correct information to start with, but it is better for them to be encouraged to do that reflection cycle, to be helped to pause and think, wait a second, system one has thrown me off, than it is to try and train system one better. That's a very powerful conclusion for somebody in education, and also a tricky thing to implement in the classroom. People's attempt to respond quickly is actually so hardwired, it's difficult to step aside. And remember, we do want to encourage the reflection, but we have to be careful because the reflection is likely to have a confirmation bias. It wants to show that system one was correct. So this is the bit where we discuss. What a relief. One thing we can do in the classroom, and one thing that physics educators have shown to be quite effective, is described by Eric Mazur in his book, Peer Instruction. This is a think, pair, share protocol. So we're going to do this in 2 stages. First of all, here's the question. If you're running a race and you pass the person in second place, what place are you in? Shh. Thinking. Now, often in a classroom context, we would now get everybody to share their personal answers. What I'm going to get you to do is share your answer with the person next to you. As you do so, explain what you think is the right answer, but also tell them why you think that's the right answer. Go. We would allow longer than this in the classroom, but what we're trying to do is get the other person to help you engage in that reflection cycle, to help you engage your system too. Maybe you can use a bit of their system too. Maybe you can share the energy burden of engaging system too. Of course, you're in second place. You probably worked that out between the two of you. But the system one answer, the immediate answer, wants you to be in first. It wants you to have overtaken the person in second place, and so you come into the lead. But if you get somebody else to help you, then you can engage that system too. Now, thinking about your thinking, so pausing to think about the way you've analyzed a new topic or an old topic, is called metacognition. It's very difficult, but more than most other educational interventions has been shown that if you can engage people metacognitively, so if you can persuade them to engage the system two thinking process, it can improve learning. So I encourage you, whenever you encounter something new, to think about your thinking, and to remember that system one is going to, if it can, give you an easy answer for obviously any new learning, but particularly today at TEDx. Thank you.